Hi there. I want to speak to the women today, and let's have a little chat about the feminine shadow as it shows up with the bitchy woman, the bitchy frenemy type relationship, or just, we often have these kinds of dynamics with other women that can get constellated in various different ways, whether it's through a friendship group, or through a workspace, and things of this nature. This confrontation with the shadow feminine power that all women confront at some point. And for many women it happens in high school, which is the emerging time, that's where menstruation starts. It's this first meeting with the instinctual aspect of the deep feminine energies, where there's the emerging sexuality as well. The eros is starting to come online, and because we're living in a culture where the dark feminine, that of the earthy, deep, the erotic, these aspects of the the Lilith nature, let's say, of the feminine aspect of being has been split off and removed from the cultural identity. And part of what we see with that is then either the suppression of sexuality, which we of course see as coming to a culminating peak in the Victorian era, but then we also see now much more of this degeneration, or the hyper-promiscuity, or the hypersexuality. But that's the other side of that problem, where because the principle of eros isn't held in a sacred regard, it either is suppressed, or that's how it works. It's either the hidden and internalized energy of that force which goes against the body. And by the way, I think this is a big reason for more and more women suffering from things like endometriosis and issues down there. It's kind of a turning against one's own biological, physical potency and vitality. And the other way that it expresses is not against the body, but then it becomes excessive, or it's a flinging out of this instinctual realm that's been perverted and retarded in a very literal sense. So it's often through this teenage girl experience that, it's not an easy time, generally. And there's often the clashes that happen within female friends, with friendship groups and all of this. And a lot of these things that are quite common experiences for girls and women are parts of this playing out of the rejected feminine power that we get kind of chaotically initiated into, but without any consciousness. So it's a big deal. And what it means to fully drop into one's own feminine power as a basic acceptance of self. This is the negative feminine problem here. A negative mother complex often means a great turning in against one's own basic nature, and a negative feminine image, which can show up in the dreams as the dark witch, the witch who eats the Hansel and Gretel, or the evil queen, all of these kinds of archetypal images, Snow Queen from Lion Witch Wardrobe. These are very, destructive energies, and that tendency to go, your very being itself is bad and you should just kill yourself and destroy yourself. And it's that which seems to show up with these big cultural phenomenons as well, such as the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, where we've got, that's in a man-woman instance, but we've got this narcissistic, bitchy, deceptive, manipulative, feminine energy through Amber Heard, who's trying, being quite violent and crazy, basically, but then, she's going to turn it around on him and try and destroy his reputation. So this kind of reputation destruction, and this inherent shame shadow, the shamey, how dare you, this is very feminine territory. And bearing in mind that while I'm talking about the feminine here, this kind of possession can show up in men as well. And in fact, I had an interaction once with a man who was very abusive emotionally, but through a dark mother complex, you know, so it can absolutely come through men. So as much as we're talking about it in feminine territory, we understand that these archetypes are constellated within, you know, they exist within every person. So they can show up there as well, even though we can make a general statement about women and womanhood and all of these sorts of things. The film Mean Girls is a great cultural example of this too, this massive phenomenon. Of course, just from a film standpoint, it's well put together, it's good scripts, well cast and all of that, but it seems to have transcended time as well, and I think because it really hits on the nature of the feminine shadow, which shows up as this bitchy, angry, controlling queen bee in the shape of Regina George. And then this weird inverted relational principle that goes on with the women around her, the girls around her, who sort of, it's a love-hate relationship. They both resent her for all of her potency and her bitchiness and all of these sorts of things, but then they want to follow her and be friends with her. There's a whole inner monologue scene with the Lindsay Lohan character who says, you know, the more I was trying to destroy Regina, I was also wanting to be accepted by her or be seen by her. Now, this is a very powerful psychological theme here, which really is evocative of this feminine shadow problem. And it runs really deep in the mass collective psyche and at the individual psyche, and most especially in a woman's psyche. Because that drive to want to be seen by the bitch, or to try and resolve that conflict, or to be in an intimate relationship, that is the classic shadow problem. And it's interesting actually, because we do see a few fairy tales pop up here and there where we've got the final scene in the fairy tale is a menage a trois situation. And we're going, oh, is this kind of a fairy tale erotica? And no, it's not about that at all, because fairy tales are speaking to a psychological dynamic. And so in the case where you've got a man and the two women, it's the Animus figure and then the unification of the feminine shadow. So the conjunctio, or the sexuality, is really about the merging of the feminine shadow with the you know, the ego self of that feminine center or something like that. And so this coming to the feminine, reuniting with that feminine shadow, and that it can actually show up a lot with even lesbian dynamics as well, actually, when let's say if a woman finds herself mostly being heterosexual and all of a sudden there's some kind of erotic projection that happens with a woman, then you're in the realm of shadow projection. And in this case, just in the same way that you can have animus projection and then be drawn to that kind of man that's reflecting that image, the same thing can happen with a female, actually. And you go, okay, why is my libido, what is that about myself that I'm trying to unify with? And it's not necessarily, if it's a bitchy woman, let's say, there's the mean bitch, so I'm trying to unify with the part of myself that's mean. It's not exactly like that, you see. It's more like that feminine shadow is a part of the feminine power that's been untouched by consciousness. It's in the shadows, and that's what makes her bitchy. So when people say things like, people who have feminine or mother complex issues, particularly with a lot of men out there in some of this manosphere space, and they go, women are inherently bitchy, manipulative, emotionally dramatic, they're just describing their own negative anima problem, basically, because that's not inherent to femininity. It's the inherent shadow of the feminine when it's rejected. So it's more like when you're in a dynamic with the mean girl as a woman, or if she's even just showing up in the dreams as these persecutory or bitchy or kinds of figures. I had a few of those women come up for a pocket with my feminine problem, where it's sort of like, whatever, I don't care what you have to say. And it's sort of some of this stuff, and I'm like, and I'm trying to communicate with them. It's like, this is a part of my own feminine territory here it's stuck far away. And it's the role of, let's say, the animus part of the woman, which is its goal is to relate to the unconscious. The consciousness has to be carried down and go, what's really going on down here? Right? Because this is part of my own vitality as a woman. Because anything that we have failed to own within ourselves that's sort of like there's a little lottery jackpot of power and vital energy in there, inspiration, creational life force. And we see so many people these days, and more so women than men, but the chronic fatigue issue, or people not having energy for their life, or feeling like a zombie in their life. It's all of these trapped parts of the libido that's stuck down there. So if you are a woman and you're finding that this negative shadow problem is getting constellated in the outer environment, you have to be very careful about meeting women like this, because there can be a draw from your angle to want to try and be friends with her and try and get her to like me, or why is she being something. You got to make sure you withdraw that, because the reality is that projection's occurring because there's something in you that's seeking to be transformed. But if you make that about her and you try and relate to a woman like that, I mean, you can guarantee you're going to get yourself into trouble, because those are the women that if you befriend them, they will end up being the one who sabotages you, whether it's through bitching about you behind your back, or just, cutting down energies. Like if you share something positive about yourself and they go, oh, that's so nice for you, kind of thing. And that reinforces your own self-deprecating nature, or, oh, I shouldn't shine, I shouldn't be radiant, right? So we have to be very careful about and discriminating about what it means when we come up against women like that in the outer environment. But if you find that there is a hook there where you're noticing, like more so, because we can meet bitchy assholey people all the time in life, right? And so sometimes you go, okay, they're not a very nice person, I'm just gonna make sure I kind of steer clear. But if you find that there's that little bit of that projection happening where you kind of want to be talking to them, or you want to know a bit more about them, or even if you decide not to interact with them, but you're thinking about them after the fact, that's the indication that there's something inside of you that's going on, that's seeking attention. And so for women like that, that is a part of you that needs that attention. Because women who are like that, like women who are bitchy and try and manipulate and control and try and play with your self-worth and cut you down and make you feel crap about yourself, that's a woman who doesn't love herself, right? That's a woman who doesn't accept herself and her own ability and her own gifts, even if she is someone who is, let's say, has a talent and is recognized for it out in the society. It's a deeper wound. It doesn't really matter what is going on the surface. It's some kind of deeper rejection there that's going on. So it is really about, how do I connect back to this deeper feminine power inside of myself and turn it over from being self-persecuting and attacking against my own nature, and claim it. Now this becomes the big challenge, right? This becomes the invitation. A lot of women in the West have become hyper-masculinized, have become more logos or more mental, and are possessed by the mind a lot more, and it takes them out of eros. That's someone like myself who's very much been a very logos type person, particularly because I had a negative mother complex. And when women have a negative mother complex, it's something like the feminine nature is so turned against itself inside of the woman that she has nowhere else to go but up to logos. And part of my own feminine shadow that played out as a young woman was it showed up as a leaking of the sexual energy, where I'd on the one part have all this rationality, but then there's this other part which was just sort of, it was all this life energy, creational force that had nowhere to go, because I didn't know how to relate to it. I was afraid of it on the one hand. It was completely out of relationship with my conscious understanding. So we see a lot of this right now, actually, this creational force that has it's like an animal that's gone wild. And certainly with images like the horse or something, the wild, untamable horse versus the horseman, the horse whisperer who, connects to that instinctual nature. And horses are a great image, actually, because they're very sensitive, they're very empathic and attuned, right? And they're very flighty as well. You have to really, really be able to breathe into that instinctual nature of the horse to build that relationship with the horse. And in fact, in one of the dreams I had, there was a horse that was one of my horses, but I'd been neglecting it in the dream. And so it looked a bit disheveled and a bit unwell and unkept, but I had a brush and I was starting to brush the tail of this horse in the dream. So there's a reference there to an instinctual nature, but it's in this somewhat feminine territory here of caring for the instinctual nature, caring for the life of the eros, of the wild horse that can run free and express itself. So for the women, reclaiming feminine power, which when unclaimed can show up with the fear of being persecuted by other women, actually constellating that through reflections in the outer life, women that want to bring you down, can actually be the mother. My mother wasn't an attacking woman, but her mother was an extremely narcissistic woman, so my maternal grandmother. So there was an inheritance still, nonetheless, of this persecutory feminine. When I first started doing this feminine work, that translated to me in a somatic sense, bringing meditative awareness into my own uterus and into the ovaries, and actually becoming somatically aware of this area, which most women aren't. I mean, most women, they have to use all these trackers and things to know when they're ovulating and shit like this. That's crazy to me now, because I'm so aware of that space down there that I know what's going on all the time. But that's out of most women's awareness in the collective at this stage, because of how it's numb down there, so to speak. You know, and then again, the endometriosis, you got to wonder, and because it's a dropping down process. Menstruation is, pregnancy and giving birth is, relaxing into an orgasmic state of being, into feeling and enjoyment. It's a exhalation. And then if everything in the culture is like up here, or if you're someone who's had that area violated in some way, shape or form, then that's all shielded up, and then you've got to be, you know, up here all the time. So yeah, coming down into this somatic area is how it really began for me. And I started having dreams with girlfriends from high school and some of these difficult friendships. And then my grandmother started showing up in the dreams, and she would be there like the 3-year-old narcissist that she was, and then in the background there was, you know, an evil, demonic, feminine force. There was one where the woman was like this, and I'm going, oh, okay, and then blah, you know, so I woke up in a sweat, and I'm going, oh my God, you know, this terrifying. But then that's the state of the feminine power inside of my own psyche. It's so unrelated to, and anything that you turn away from in psyche, the further you turn away from it, it distorts and becomes malevolent. This is how it works. So the unconscious gives you the face that you're turning towards it. Now, I wasn't meaning to reject my ultimate vital feminine power, but that's just what was inherited and what was going on, right? I mean, I'm unconscious as to why that's happened at the time. And so this gradual process of, whoa, okay, I've got to contend with this force here now and see that it's part of myself. And that's hiding in the depths there. And so then, yeah, the transforming of these images, eventually the witchy images dissolved, and it was other kinds of, there was some crone images in there, and then some other more direct shadow figures that showed up in the dream, women about my age with holding keys or not wanting to talk to me. And so all of these different dream images starting to give context and further indication of what's going on in that feminine story of the reclamation of that vital energy and penetrating the rejected depths of the feminine voice. And that becoming, upon meeting new layers of it, a kind of feminine, just a basic vital power. So it's a reclaiming of one's own radiance and the innocence of the radiance. The whole thing with, in the medieval times with the witch burning, I mean, that's the projection of the negative mother onto women. And often the earthy women, the natural women, that you know, and that the innocence of that. But because it's been so split from the collective psyche, it's like that we don't know what this deeper feminine instinctual wisdom looks like. We have to go back to the primitive tribes and see your Venus of Willendorf figures, where it's the big fat mama with the big boobs and the big butt, and that's the earthy, abundant, big belly laughing, radiance of this instinctual femininity. And that ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a part of our own life force and sense of strength, power, vitality, and creative inspiration as women. So it's a whole big mapping constellation here with the feminine story. And there's been various attempts by certain subcultures and movements You see it in the hippie movement, women talking about, their sacred feminine, their eros, and they're dancing around in their moon circles and their drum circles. But this, guys, this really isn't it either, okay? A lot of this is very, it comes across, it feels immature, it comes across as very adolescent, and it's sort of it's a fake, not a fake, it's a superficial attempt at grabbing onto a feminine identity, which doesn't concern itself with the real work of going inward and transforming the energy at its root, where the problem really lies. It's not about getting on the skirt and growing the hair long and dancing around with a drum. Although, I don't want to necessarily condemn the play with things like wardrobe or something, because part of the solution, which I was getting to before, of claiming this feminine eros problem is to start connecting to the body and the sense of feeling and the instinctual sense of enjoyment with life, as well as the pain, because one of the reasons we don't want to feel joy is that often on the other side of feeling more enjoyment and pleasure in the body and in the bodily experience of matter itself, there's often another round of pain that comes with that. And interesting that the menstrual cycle for women reflects that process, where you've got this peak of the ovulation, of the flowering radiance, and then there's a death process. And then that premenstrual and a passing through that negativity. If women can relate to this process consciously, the capacity for transformation really can speed up quite exponentially. There's a real fluidity and flexibility and an ability to move with what is basically this simple biological process with consciousness. I mean, the kinds of dreams that I get pre-menstruation, just before when I'm getting ready to release something, I mean, it's really interesting what can come up there now that I'm engaging with this process of transformation, where the psychic and the physiological life, again, what I said in my last video was that the thing about archetypes is that they've co-evolved with the physiology. So it's this self-portrait of the instinct, as Jung said. So they're interwoven, right? So you're going through psychic transformation. It's connected to the instinctual realm. It's connected to the body. It's connected to these somatic angles. I mean, you can have Animus dreams. Women wake up with headaches and it's like, oh, that's the head coming in and, graping me, so to speak. It's deeply connected in with the body as well, right? So where am I going with that? I'm just tangenting off in different directions, but there is something to coming into the body. And maybe that means, okay, I'm going to just experiment today with just going with what feels good, and not in the shadowy sense that we have with this collective narrative where, facts are better than feelings. It's like, yeah, but you're criticizing feelings from a place of not having real mature relationship with feeling. Yeah, so feelings, when they're not related to properly, or when that faculty is degenerated, are reactive and scattered and untrue. A feeling in a mature sense is an indicator of what you value, of what's important, of how you feel about a situation. It gives you actually objective data about a circumstance. And interesting that with the 4 functions in the Jungian work, the thinking, feeling, and then sensation, intuition. The thinking, feeling, that polarity there, they're considered on the objective axis, whereas sensation and intuition are the irrational, because it's pulling from a different kind of information processing. But it's thinking, what is this? That's my camera, it's rectangular, it's black, that's a camera. How do I feel about it? I feel, you'd say if we're connecting it to the camera, it would be, that's something about creative inspiration to film something. So that the feeling nature tells me something about my own value system and about my own personal orientation towards it. So it gives me actually objective data about a situation, which is why people who are strong feeling types can have very accurate impressions of what's going on in someone else's being at any one time. They can make the good therapeutic type of person, for instance, for that reason. It's a kind of empathy of sorts, and that tells you something objective about that person's subjective experience, you see. So again, as I'm tangenting off a little bit, but it's more about the maturation of these feeling, tangible, eros pleasure principles, and having to go, okay, what does feel good for my body today? And not from that place of the rejection of feeling where it's like, okay, I'm going to go get drunk and party and have sex with everyone. And that's not relating to feeling. That's scattered movements of psyche. What feels good today? Wearing my big wide brim hat. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't have picked that today had I been deciding from how I usually decide to wear. Well, that's what I want to wear today. Okay, so it's these sorts of processes that we're invited into as an early starting point for dealing with the feminine shadow problem of starting to go, what is my relationship to my own instinctuality, to the processes of integrity that emerge from the impulses and desires of my own body and how it moves throughout space throughout the day. This is a big work for the feminine problem, a huge work, because as we discussed in the earlier treatise of this video, that shows up, that rejection of the feminine shows up as the bitchy, the witchy, the life destroying, as opposed to a life affirming, which would be a positive mother. It's an encouragement. It's, you know what, you are okay just as you are, and live in yourself and be in yourself as you are, and be in the bountiful abundance of life. That is the deep maternal earthly love of the mother, and unfortunately a lot of us have missed that. So we just don't even have a context. We feel so uprooted and unconnected with ourselves, and then the modern problem accentuates that through the busyness, and it's just things become more and more mental, and it's too much mind, it's too much logos, it's too much unrelated kinds of thinking, which drives women insane, by the way. And that's why you get a lot of this craziness with a lot of modern women today, of these, they're opinionated and they're thinking all these types of things, but they don't really know what their opinion is, because that's the negative animus, which is kind of feeding off all of their unowned feminine power, actually. And then it's unrelated, scattered thinking versus what actually is my true perspective on something. Requires a bit of quietude and a bit of slowing things down and relating to the self, which is kind of a psychosomatic experience, actually, going deep into the well of my inner life. So there's a lot more that could be said on this subject matter in particular, because the feminine problem is so big and it's so mysterious to a lot of people. But I hope if you're a woman watching that it gave you a little bit of something to ponder on. And if you felt things clicking over in this video, pay attention especially to your dreams and make sure you write them down, because sometimes just hearing some of these ideas go around, they can click things over in the psyche, and then you can get some dream images that help reflect some things being worked out in that unconscious psychic process. So anyway, if that's the case, drop me a comment and let me know what you observed, and yeah, we'll see you soon, hopefully. Thank you very much.